Hey, welcome to the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. This is brought to you by Cornwell Tools. They're the choice of professionals since 1919. Yeah, 1919. A little bit of quick math work. That's over 100 years of building top quality tools. I'm your host, Stacey David. All right, let's turn the key and get rolling. All right, everybody, the first question that I've got here today has to do with street racing. Now, for those of you that are out there and pretend like you don't street race, you're a liar. Because we've all done it some. That's what car guys do. I'll be the first to tell you, I did it quite a bit when I was in high school and in college. Things have changed a lot, obviously. First of all, there weren't Hellcats running around on the street, and there weren't 700 and 800 horsepower street cars. The street racing world has gotten kind of crazy. There is a news story that just came out today where a young lady was killed by some street racers that lost control of their car, and they drove off. And this is starting to happen more and more. It's happening a lot out in LA, and it's happening in other places. And I'll tell you what, guys, if you do a little history check, that is what killed the muscle car era the first time. It was insurance, and it was illegal street racing. That is why the NHRA was created, so they could build drag strips and they could build road courses and stuff to get us off the street. So if you're going to race, go to a track, because what'll happen, there's going to be some big accident that's going to happen, and somebody's going to pass legislation. They're going to pass a law that you can't have over 100 horsepower or whatever on the street, and it will go that quickly. There is nothing in the Constitution that says we can build 600 horsepower cars. That's just part of that freedom to do what you want. Well, if somebody legislates that away because of people being stupid, it ruins it for everybody. Case in point, the guys at Stainless Works are good friends of mine. They've done several exhaust systems on Sergeant Rock. They did one on the Harry Holler. They did the exhaust system on the V8 Interceptor. They did the one on the Cheetah. They do some of the best custom headers and exhaust systems out there. Well, they also build racing headers and racing exhaust. And they have stopped selling their racing exhaust, period. And the reason they have is that people were putting them on street cars. And then the industry was coming back, and Stainless Works was getting in trouble. So they had to pull that off the market. People being dumb, even though it's fun, has a real consequence. So guys, you got to be thinking about that when you go out there. I'll give you one of my stories that kind of did it for me. I had a Mustang, a 67 Shelby Mustang that I had hot rodded up. And I had a guy pull up beside me one night in his Fox body Mustang, and he's revving his engine, and we were off. And I left him standing there holding his shorts. And it was great, and I was going down through a school zone. I remember it's about 11 o'clock at night. And I got that car, front end of it airborne, going through a dip in the intersection. And I look in my rearview mirror, and I dragged my headers, a big row of sparks behind me as this guy was coming beside me. And it dawned on me, if there had been a kid playing with a ball or something, I'd have had him. I couldn't have stopped. And it was a real eye-opener for me. You know, like, what am I doing here? So I haven't really street raced since. I always go out to the drag strip. I always go out to the organized tracks, to road course or whatever. That's what those are for. They have the proper safety protocols. That's the place to go, guys. Listen, I know you're watching, Street Outlaws and stuff like that, and it all looks great. But listen, there are some serious consequences, not only for you, but the whole industry. So be careful out there. Have fun with your cars. But man, be careful, because they're starting to pass legislation, and they're starting to look for people that are doing stupid stuff. So I just encourage you to be careful and have fun. Okay, the big news here for you Bronco fans. I know you go, oh, he's going to talk about the new Bronco again. No, I'm not. I'm going to talk about the world's most famous Bronco. Big Oly Bronco that Parnelli Jones built back in the late 60s, early 70s. If you've not seen Big Oly, everything about this thing is just amazing. First of all, it's painted like a big Olympia beer can, because that was the sponsor that Parnelli was running at the time. And it was state of the art. I was fortunate enough to do a story on Big Oly years ago, and I spent some seat time in the truck. And Parnelli was such a cool dude. Parnelli started racing Broncos and immediately tore them up. And he realized that he didn't need that front axle, the four-wheel drive. So Big Oly was always a two-wheel drive truck. A lot of people don't realize that. And it was what would become what we know as the trophy truck. He built this thing to fly through the air. He put the big wing on it for downforce. And this thing won back-to-back Baja 1000s. And it went on to win the Mint 400, the Baja 500. Parnelli raced it from 70 to 74. And I don't believe the truck was ever beaten. It was just phenomenal. Probably one of the most famous race vehicles of all time. If you're sitting around waiting for something to do one night, rent the original Gone in 60 Seconds. Not the Nicolas Cage one from a few years back, the original one.
This is Maindrian Pace, #1 car thief in America. He'll steal anything, anytime, as long as it's insured. His front, insurance investigation. His business, stealing cars. And now he's got to fill the biggest contract yet. You can lock your car, but if he wants it, it's gone in 60 seconds. Sometimes when you steal a car, you get more than you bargained for. Holy shit. Fasten your seatbelt for what Carcraft magazine calls the most hair-raising chase scene ever filmed. You owe it to your car to see Gone in 60 Seconds. It's grand theft entertainment.
Big Oly and Parnelli make a appearance in that movie because Big Oly gets stolen by the thieves. Big Oly's been around a long time, and Parnelli has always kept it, and he's finally putting it up for auction. I don't know what this thing's going to go for, but if the Steve McQueen Bullet Mustang went for $3 million and change, and the Batmobile went for $3 million and change, I would be shocked if Big Oly didn't at least do that, maybe more. It just depends on who wants that thing. I am hard-pressed to think of a more famous vehicle, especially a racing vehicle. You know, it could bring $5 to $10 million. It just, just depends on who's the player in that game. The best thing about Big Oly, though, Parnelli kept these things fully operational. You literally can put gas in it and go out and run Baja with it today. He did not have a museum. He was very adamant about that. He had a garage, and all of his stuff was functional. To the lucky person that buys Big Oly, you're not buying a show vehicle. You're getting in something that you go out and jump 10 feet in the air at 140 miles an hour. And Parnelli did that. So I've got story after story of him talking about some of the things that he did in that truck that are just amazing. So it's good to see it back out, going to auction. I kind of hate that Parnelli's selling it. I just hope that it goes someplace where it won't be just squirreled away into somebody's collection. It will be out there where people can see it. It was a chrome moly chassis, rear-wheel drive. I believe it was a 351 Windsor engine in it. Had the big wing on the top with the lights that popped up. Fiberglass body. Parnelli beat this thing. He rolled this thing all the time. I believe both times he came in on the Baja 1000, truck had been rolled 3 or 4 times. So it was just beat the heck. He put another body on it, and off she go. And one of the cool things, I was doing a story on Parnelli a few years ago. You guys are going to love this. And I've always been a fan of Big Oly. Matter of fact, my Crazy Horse Bronco was to pay tribute to Big Oly. But anyway, I was out there and I was talking with Parnelli, and we're going through his collection. And there on the wall is this huge poster, and it shows Big Oly in the air. All 4 wheels are in the air. And it says, "It's the water," and it was the poster that they did back in 1974. I'm looking at that poster going, gosh, I'd give anything for one of those. And Parnelli goes, I think we got a box of them in the back. So he goes to the back room, and he's got some of them from 74. And so he gives me one of those, and he signs it, and the other guys in the shop there sign it. So I've got that. That hangs on the wall in my office. It's one of my most prized possessions because it is not a reissue. It is the original right from the man himself. And I can't own Big Oly, but I can own the poster. So anyway, good luck to you guys out there bidding on it. If things work out the way we want, we're going to try to get out and do a story at the Mecum auction when Big Oly goes across the block, because I hope Parnelli's there. If things work out, we will see you there. We'll see what happens with Big Oly, world's most expensive beer can.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I've got a question for you guys. What is the most important tool in your garage? All right, I know you're thinking. Come on. Give me, yeah, all right. All right, well, it's probably the one you use the most. And that would be your sockets, your ratchets, your screwdrivers, and your wrenches. And if you want quality tools there, you probably ought to check out somebody like Cornwell. Now, granted, you can get some cheaper tools. And honestly, there's a place for those ones that you want to bend up and heat and go into certain places, and those screwdrivers you don't mind screwing up. Well, that's where you get the cheap stuff. But if you want real quality tools that are going to last and have a warranty, that's where you need to check out somebody like Cornwell. They've been doing it forever, And believe me, you do get what you pay for.
See, a lot of people don't realize, especially now, that Parnelli came up through IndyCar. Parnelli won everything. Probably one of the greatest drivers, natural talents of all time. But anyway, the wing on Big Oly was something that came out of the IndyCar world. They were just starting to put wings on things. The Chaparral cars, trying to get that downforce. And so Parnelli's out there going, and he's going across the desert, jumping these things. And he's like, how do I make this thing fly and come down? And the wing, it was all manually operated. It had a big lever in the center, and it would notch up, and it had little detents in it, and you could adjust that wing to adjust the downforce. And it worked, man. And it was really cool to be in there. And they had another big lever that you flipped, and two big off-road lights would come up out of the wing. So it's just really cool, really innovative at the time. They had first started at that point. They weren't using catheters back then. Now they use catheters, so you just pee while you're going, and it goes out a hose and down by your foot. They would have to get out, and go. So out there in the desert in the dark, and other cars and motorcycles are coming by. It was insane. It's like Mad Max, no roads, no gasoline stations, One of my favorite stories, I was talking to James Duff, who also raced Broncos at the time, and he said he's out going across the desert, and he said he sees these lights coming up behind him, and he knows who it is. It's Parnelli. He said Parnelli went by him at about $110, and James is probably doing 80. And then keep in mind, this is across the desert.
Right.
Washes, boulders, crazy. And Oly's gone. And he said he's watching those taillights, and all of a sudden the taillights just go vertical and disappear. And he said he knew what happened. He said they rolled it. So he said he comes up, he pulls up, and there it is. Big Oly's on its side, and Strope is out, and Parnelli is out, and they're fighting. And Strope was like, I told you to back off this thing. And Parnelli's like, well, I'm trying to win. And the tools are all over the desert and everything. And Duffy said he looked at that, and he's like, these guys have it handled. And off he went, leaving those guys fighting in the desert. Oh, gosh. I just cracked up because that's exactly how they were. Parnelli was hardcore, man. And sure enough, they got it back together. And here he comes by again. And the guy wins, man. And I had a chance when I was talking to him, because Parnelli, like I said, he won Indy. He won Can-Am. He won the Boss Trans Am Series. He pretty much won everything he tried. Interesting character, because generally somebody is really gifted in one type of racing, but not another. And Parnelli was kind of one of those guys. It didn't matter what kind of car you put it in. The guy would win. He wouldn't just compete. He would win. I said, in all the racing that you've done, what was your favorite? And he goes, no question, off-road. I said, really? Over IndyCar? He goes, yeah. I said, IndyCar. He said, I got bored in IndyCar. Now, let that sink in.
Yeah.
He's going 200 and some miles an hour, on old bias ply tires, and he's starting to look at the sky, and he's bored. That's somebody whose mind's moving a lot quicker than the rest of us. But he said the desert racing, once he found that, he said that was just so much fun and so challenging. It's really cool that in the wake of all that, he leaves a vehicle like Big Oly. That, they've just done a die cast out of it. I just think it's a really cool tribute to him. I wish more people knew about him. Hopefully we can help kind of tell that story. He was a unique person. Man, you don't want to mess with him. When I first walked up to him, we were doing an interview, and I was having a really good time with him. And, we bonded. As one of the questions, I said, so, Parnelli, now that you're retired, I said, he stopped me right there. He goes, what do you mean retired? And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, since you're not racing, he goes, oh, I still race. And he said, who told you I retired? And I'm like, okay, this guy, he's about to kick my ass. And I don't, and I was like, no, slip of the words. I didn't mean that. He says, you can go right now down there and look on the driver's log. He said, I am an active driver. I have never retired. And I'm like, my bad. I didn't mean that. I mean, no disrespect, And the guy just still had it, man. He could get out there. When they came out with the Parnelli Jones edition Mustang a few years ago, a lot of people don't realize it was kind of something that snuck out. They brought him out as a tribute. He was going to be there, and then they had this professional driver that was going to run the good times.
Right.
Okay, so they get out on the track, and They run out there, and Parnelli takes it around the track. And he's like a tenth of a second slower than the professional driver. And they're like, and nobody knows how old Parnelli is. You don't dare ask him. It's like, I think he taught Noah to drive, but he's just like, he's got it, man. He's just that guy. And I just love him for it, man.
It's interesting, though, when you're talking about it and about the mindset, about like, and it could be every racer, but it seems to be like the phenomenal racers.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you listen to the whole monologue in Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah.
And he's talking about 7,000 RPMs, and there's that moment that you hit.
Yeah.
In that stride. And I've always kind of thought about that when you would come up against really, really great drivers that were out there, is that they just see it. They see it so much better than everybody else.
Yeah.
There's some way that they can sock it around, kind of like that free climber.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was just like, hey, here we go, boop, boop, boop.
Absolutely.
And maybe that is why he was so successful across all kinds of racing platforms. Do you find that? Do you find when you talk, you've talked to many more drivers than I've ever talked to, that just their thought process is
absolutely
just different.
And the thing that I've noticed is that most of them, they kind of are from two different schools. They're either very calculated, and it's all mathematics, and it's all about angles and this kind of thing. And there's no thought of mortality or anything like that. Death is not even something they think about. It's just all math. It's the angles and the apex of the turn and the braking, and everything is precision, and they're just like a machine.
Yeah.
And then there's the other ones that are almost exactly the opposite. It's all feel. And they don't know how they do it. They just do it. And they're just a natural driver.
Yeah.
Petty was kind of like that. He was just a great driver. And so was Earnhardt. It was a little bit of that fearlessness, and it was just, they just had that feel, where others were very calculated. And Parnelli kind of rides somewhere in between, because Big Oly was kind of his creation. So he understood the science of it, but he was also that rough and tumble dude.
Sure.
And he grew up in an era where if he didn't win, he didn't eat that night. That's a rough world. That's a carny type of world.
Yeah.
So he had to, win the race, get his $6 and get a burger that night, back in the late 50s and stuff. But yeah, there's a fearlessness about him. And that's one thing, as soon as a driver starts to overthink something, they're not a good driver anymore. It gives them that moment of hesitation. And they might be a good driver, but they'll never be a great driver. And it's the same thing that they saw in fighter pilots. They just do it, and they just feel it. And a lot of times they can't even tell you how they're doing it. When I was in Mexico, I went there a few years ago to do the Mexican 1000. And I was going to ride with Walker Evans, who was another off-road legend. And Parnelli was there with his... He didn't have Big Oly, but he had the Blazer. He did a Blazer later on, had the big wing on it and everything. This was like a K5 Blazer. Mm-hmm. He had it, and it was like a vintage thing. And it was the craziest thing. I went in there, and I had a Mexican translator there for me. I'm hanging out with this guy, and the BAJA 1000 in Mexico is like the Super Bowl times 10 here. When I mentioned that I was hanging out with Parnelli Jones, well, I told him I was going to drive with Walker Evans, and I thought the guy was going to pass out. It's like I told him I was going to hang out with Eric Clapton or something.
Right.
And then I walk over, and there's Parnelli Jones, who I know. So I walk over, and I introduced him to Parnelli Jones. I thought the guy was going to wet his pants. It's like, to him, it was the Beatles.
Yeah.
And in Mexico, those guys are it. He's like, oh, I can't believe that you know these guys. I said, well, you know them now. So anyway, we're tooling down the road, and they've gone down, and it wasn't a true race. It was kind of a recognized thing kind of deal. So they're out there, and here's Parnelli alongside of the road in his Bronco changing a tire. They've had a flat. So we pull over, and I'm like, Parnelli, what's up? And he's like, flat tire kind of thing. And I said, well, let us help you. And you got to just jump in and help Parnelli because he's not going to let you, So we get there and we help him. He'd hit a rock or something, broken a valve stem off, and it was aluminum. So he pulled that off and he threw it into the grass. And I reached over and picked it up and I gave it to that guy. And I said, this is your souvenir. This is off Parnelli's truck.
Yeah.
And we got a picture of it. And Parnelli was funny. He goes, yeah, we're your new pit crew. He goes, yeah, we're the jack-offs. Because we're sitting there, and I was like, how cool was that?
That's awesome.
And listen, that guy, I promise you he's got that valve stem sitting in a very special place
Oh, absolutely.
because, like I said, to them, it was really cool. But Parnelli was just a great guy. So was Walker. All those guys, it's a rough and tumble world, that off-road deal. Such a great thing.
Yeah.
I wish, of all the vehicles, Brian Downard from Low Car is the one that sent me the thing about Big Oly going on the block. And he was like, you deserve this vehicle. You're the one that should have this. And I'm like, yeah, send me $5 million, dude, and I'll buy it and we'll go riding.
That's right.
Of all of those vehicles, though, that'd be the one I'd want to have. It is a legend.
All right, that's it for today. Once again, we're brought to you by Cornwell Tools. Have a great day and get out there and work on something.